half of my career has been quite literally in the fire from the frying pan. and I think that's probably the biggest change that occurred in my life, was being able to fail and not freak out. I think the culture of failure that we have really hinders a lot of growth for a lot of people. Don't be afraid. I mean, that computer is not going to chew your arm off up to the elbow. It's just not. It's not going to reach out and poke you in the eye. It's not going to do anything that you don't tell it to do. And I think if you approach it from that perspective, or even if you're thinking about a different career, what's the worst that could happen? You fall flat on your butt, and then you pick yourself up and you try something else. Honestly, failure is not the end as long as you learn from it. Failure is an amazing thing. It's one of the best teachers we have in life. So don't be afraid to fail. Jump in with both feet. Ask a lot of questions. Reach out, and I think you'll be fine. You know, some people are great in school. Some people suck at school. Some people are great at taking tests. Some people are awful. So you have to find the channel that makes it come to you. If that means reading a different book, asking somebody, doing something different, coming back to it another way. Maybe you jumped in and realized, ooh, I need a little background first. Go back to the 101 piece and then come back into it. There's lots of different avenues to learn. The trick is, if you're going to learn new things, and I'm one of those people that I read all the time.
Hello, welcome to Creativity Boost Podcast. In today's episode, I have a very, very interesting and exceptional topic that we're going to be discussing. And there's no better person to discuss this with me than someone that I hold in high esteem, a woman who has blazed the trail in the tech industry. Her name is Carrie. She has decades of experience in the tech industry, and she has founded a company, and she's also an author of a very powerful book titled Jumpstart Your Career in Data Centers. And this book has become a bestseller on Amazon. Today, we're going to be discussing digital revolution and how you can reinvent yourself in a creative way to respond to the digital revolution that we are in currently. Before we go further into all of these, I'm going to bring on my guest and just say hi to her. Hello, Carrie. How you doing?
Hey, how are you? Great. I'm doing great. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so exciting to have you on the show, and I want to say thank you for coming to share your wealth of experience and your insights with us. Today, we're going to be talking about digital revolution. And before we go into all of that, I would like you to just give us a background on what you see about what's going on in the world right now and the revolution that's taking over industries right now.
Yeah, I think probably the one that most people are paying attention to right now is AI. Clearly, we have regular AI, we have generative AI. To be fair, AI has been around for a long time, and it's been part of our lives. You just didn't realize it because a lot of it's happened behind the scenes. But now with ChatGPT and Bard and some of the other ones out there, it's starting to come into focus, and people are really starting to play with these tools.
So what do you have to say about this trend, and what do you think the future holds for us with all of these things that are happening now?
Well, I would say the first thing is that it might be taking some jobs away, but it's definitely creating other jobs, right? So if I'm going to write an AI engine to take over part of my day, I'm going to write that AI engine to take over the worst part of my day, right? The stuff that's repetitive, it's easy to do. And what that does is it takes all that off my plate, and now I have the opportunity to grow, to become more strategic, to do other things for a company. I know that we've seen some big layoffs, with some of the tech companies, but you have to keep in mind, when you talk about a job in tech or a career in tech, there's a lot that makes a tech company run. It's everything from janitorial staff to marketing staff, admins, accounting, salespeople. I mean, all of those people are part of this industry. Now, you take any one of those and say, what if we could take your job and we could get rid of the most mundane, horrible, rotten piece of it? Everybody would sign up for that. And I think that's really where AI has the opportunity. But I think building on the backs of that, we have to realize that the majority of information has been created in the last few years. Now, granted, some of that's digitizing old information, but we have a lot that's been created in the last few years. And we all know that not all of it and not everything that we hear is truthful, right? We hear all the time where they reported something on the news and then it became factually incorrect, but you don't hear the retraction. You hear the original news story, right? We, I think, as a society, have got to get much better at critical thinking and checks and balances. And that is where I think we're going to see a whole new industry come out of AI, is that somebody's got to check it. Somebody's got to make sure that this information is right, because there's horrible ramifications if you don't. For instance, if I write a book right now using AI, that's part of the public domain. I lose my copyright. I lose everything. But it's got my name on it. So if I put something out there that's completely incorrect because I'm stupid enough to just blindly copy what AI gave me, I'm now liable for that information. And for companies that have to worry about people that are uploading confidential information into AI, you should be, because now that's part of their large language model. So I think what we're going to see out of AI is really a whole new set of careers, one that deals with the legalities of it, one that deals with identifiable information, personal information, company secrets, trade secrets, IP. We're going to have a whole industry spring out that teaches companies how to responsibly deal with and use AI. And I think we're going to have opportunities that come out of that, but we definitely have to have the checks and balances. And that's something you're not going to get a machine to do, right? If I tell, it's just like being a parent, right? When your kid is in trouble, you can only act on the information that you've been given. Now, sometimes you'll punish your kid for the wrong thing, and you'll have to go back and say, okay, well, I realize I was wrong. Sometimes you won't punish your kid and they'll get away with stuff because it's stuff that you didn't see, right? We can only act on the best information we have at any given point in time. The trick is to make sure, especially if we're going to support our business with it or support ourselves with it, is that we make sure that that's accurate. We make sure that it's coming from a place that's verifiable. We know enough that we can verify that information ourselves so that we protect ourselves and our company from that liability, but also protect our reputations and our brands, because nobody wants to be that person. So while I will say, some of these AI engines, especially the generative AI ones, can write for you, do you have enough confidence to put your name, your reputation, and everything on that without factually checking it? And that's where I think we're going to see a new industry. We're going to see these people where one AI engine can check another one. We're going to see people that are really applying critical thinking skills to a variety of applications around AI to make sure that tech's working for us and we're not allowing tech to control us. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. I totally get it. Now, let's talk about your book. When I saw your book, that really jumped on my face. The title jumped on my face. And the title of that book is Jumpstart Your Career in Data Centers. And the part of that book that jumped out of my face is the first three words, jumpstart your career. And why that jumped to my face is that the idea of jumpstarting a vehicle that is stuck or that has its battery drained just to get it to work is the same idea I had when I created this podcast with the concept of igniting creativity, boosting creativity, just with the idea of boosting a car that has its battery down. And so that's part of the reasons why I brought you on this show, so that you can tell us a bit about what inspired you to help people actually jumpstart their career. So it means that there are people in careers that are dying or that are dead, just like a dead car battery, and their careers needs to be jumpstarted. And that in itself requires creativity. So can you tell us a bit about the inspiration behind your book and how you can actually guide people into that phase of transition with the principles that you laid out in your book?
So the idea behind the book, really, the full title is Jumpstart Your Career in Data Centers, featuring careers for women, trades, and vets in tech. So there's college curriculum out there for engineering, lawyers, a lot of those things that kind of fall in, for people to fall into tech. But, very young, I was traveling with a lot of salespeople, and they're trained in, how to sell a certain product. And when the conversation gets away from that, they glass over. And I thought, well, that's a horrible way to treat new employees, right? We're not investing in their career. We're not really setting them up for success. What we're doing is we're training them on one thing, and then we're kind of counting on them to learn everything else as they go. Well, what happens is that person feels isolated. And at the time when I wrote the book, the attrition rate for women in tech was 67%. Not that left a job, left an entire industry. When they had completely applicable experience, they could have taken to a number of other jobs within the industry. Trades are the same thing. We owe the trades everything. If it weren't for the trades, nothing would be built. And to me, I don't think that it matters how you get knowledge. It matters that you get knowledge. And being able to learn places that you can apply a craft that you enjoy is really important. And then, of course, for the veterans community, if you serve this country, thank you for your service, by the way. But if you serve this country or your country, I think that you deserve every opportunity at a great paying job. And we have great jobs for veterans. It's a huge community within the industry. And so I really wanted something that would speak to people that had different experience outside of a college classroom that could speak to, hey, look, here's an industry. Here's basically how it works. It's not an 800-page textbook. That was the only other book that was out there when I started writing this book, was an 800-page textbook. Nobody's going to read that to see if they want to join an industry. So I wanted something that was pretty plain and common sense, but really written so that people could understand, A, how the industry works. So we take all the mystification, all the jargon, all that stuff out of it. Just really give the basics about what is a data center, how do they work, and here's the jobs every step of the way, kind of how you get there. And then after that, I wrote the educator's reference so that teachers could begin incorporating that in their classroom. And then I wrote a children's book to go with it so that we can start using some of these technical terms with kids, and kids have an understanding of how the internet works, where they go, so they can be better digital citizens, and also start putting this on their career paths. Like, there's been study after study after study that says that after the age of 5, most kids are pretty picked out what they're going to be, and a lot of that is based on what their parents know. But if your parents don't know what a data center is, then clearly that's not going to be in your vision, right? So I wanted something that starts normalizing the terminology in data centers, that starts bringing some of those concepts into people's lives so that they see that after the age of 5, right? I see myself in one of these careers. So kind of, if you can see it, you can be it kind of thing, So yeah, so something for all ages.
That's so inspiring. So how do you think people can jumpstart their career now? I understand the fact that the book was niched down to women and, in tech and whatnot, but I believe the principles are pretty much the same. And I believe there's someone who's listening out there who may just be at a point in their career that they need to jumpstart their career because their careers are dying or is dead, So
they're just not interested anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's getting, uninteresting. So what would you recommend, and what are the things that such a person can do to begin to jumpstart their career?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is figure out what's out there, right? It's hard to say I want to go do something new if you know nothing about it. One of my favorite things to do when I was traveling was figure out what the person on the seat next to me does on the plane. I have traveled with people. I traveled with a human dog food taste tester. Never had any idea that profession existed. I sat next to a guy that's an engineer that designs new toothpicks. We've been using toothpicks forever. Who would have thought we still have engineers for some of that? So, you figure out all these different things, but you figure that out by exposure, right? That's how you know that you have an interest or something is going to be viable for your next stage in life or whatever your next venture is. So I wanted something that was kind of jargon-free that would just put that out there. So I think the biggest thing to do is kind of figure out where you want to be in tech. One of the problems that we have, I think, in this country for sure, is when we introduce technology to people, we do that through coding classes for kids. Now, I used to write code. I could write beautiful code. I don't like to write code. Right? And so there's a lot of people out there that think, well, I tried coding. I was exposed to coding in school. I had to write a program. I absolutely hated it. So technology is not for me. When coding is such a tiny little piece of technology. There's a ton all the way around this. There's developing new products. There's writing software. There's making the environment work right. There's HVAC, plumbing, electrical, all of the specialties, construction, you name it. There's a million things that you can do in this industry that have nothing to do with writing a line of code. And so the first part, I think, if you're really kind of stuck in figuring out where you want to go, is figure out what some of those are. And that's why I wrote that book really from a job perspective. It's like, well, here's the concept. If that's kind of cool for you, here's some jobs that do that. And then go investigate getting a certification or something. You know, as a single mom, a certification is a life-changing event. You know, the book applies to everybody. I did put extra resources in there for women, trades, and vets because they're very underserved in tech as a whole. Matter of fact, I think we definitely need to improve diversity across the board in technology so that it works better for us, right? And that's everything. That's not the color of your skin, your age, to me, I view diversity as fingerprints, right? Because we all have different needs from technology. And that's the way that we keep technology working for us, is if we have as many fingerprints as possible in the pie. And we don't care if, one is from Chicago and one is from Jackson, Mississippi. They have viable inputs. And when you put those two minds together, that's where innovation really happens, right? If you only hire people that have been trained in college, what you're doing is you're hiring a workforce that's been taught this is the way to solve a problem. When you hire people from all the different backgrounds, you now have the opportunity to say, here's the problem. How would you solve that? And now you get the people that just reach and get it and fix things. You know, we all know that person that can take anything apart and put it back together without the first direction. You mix that person with an engineer, you're going to get a very different outcome than if you give it to the engineer only, who has been taught one way to do things, right? So we add the creative element, we add the different backgrounds, and we add other things to the mix, and now technology becomes a different animal. We bring people in that are neurodivergent. How is technology working for you? How do you interact with your devices? Because they're not going to be the same way that somebody else interacts with a device. How are you, all blonde-haired women are not going to have the same needs out of technology. Some are going to need one thing, some are going to need another thing. So I think really that exposure and bringing all these people into the fold is a great thing. And most of our jobs don't require a degree. You'd be surprised. I mean, there's some, certainly professional engineers, architects, the ones that need a professional certification to go with that. And I'm not knocking college at all. It's a great way to learn for some people, but not everybody has 4 years before they can, or 5 today is what the average time is to graduate. A lot of people don't have that before they need to start being productive. And most of these big companies will pay for that college. So if you start in a career, start in the industry, and then be a sponge, learn from everybody around you, because that's how we all learn. This is the longest ongoing apprenticeship probably outside of medical that we've ever had, because that's how we all learn. The curriculum's not there. Everybody learns from everybody else. So start. And then you can figure out, you can look at all the jobs around you, get involved in some of the organizations, figure out what other people do, talk, network, and then kind of carve your way. And if you want that college degree, these companies will pay for that. And you're working throughout that period of time, and you're not, mounting massive amounts of debt because you have a tuition reimbursement program that's behind you. But everybody wants to work differently. Not everybody wants to go to college.
Yeah, you made a very fair point, and there's something that I'd like to take you up on based off what you said, because I've met some people who took interest in the concept of transitioning their careers. They started out in traditional careers after having a college degree, and in an attempt to transition into a digitally compliant career, if I'm to put it that way, in an attempt to do that, they faced lots of challenges. For example, the imposter syndrome that embraced them when they tried to venture into that field. or when they try to interview for a job in that field, even after taking tutorials and feeling like, oh, they had enough information to go in, the imposter syndrome appeared to be overwhelming for some of them. There are a number of them who succeeded because they burned the bridge, but there are some of them, especially those who still have an option B, like, why don't I just go back to my career and just hope that, in my lifetime things work out, instead of transitioning into an entirely new career or transitioning into tech with the imposter syndrome that comes with it and all the other challenges that comes with it. So how would you say people like this can handle that challenge if they actually want to transition?
So personally, I think that we've done a huge disservice by naming it the imposter syndrome, right? Because now it sounds like a disease. I personally think that a healthy dose of apprehension is important for your growth, right? If you feel a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit uneasy, that's good because you're going to try to fix that. That's your body, your mind identifying to you that you're in a period of growth. And growth is scary. So you can jump in, you can go read a book, you can do a MOOC, which is, if you don't know what those are massive open online courses. So it's the same same classes they teach at college. You don't have to pay for it, but you don't get credit for it, right? But you still have the benefit of the knowledge. There's lots of ways out there that you can find information. Talk to peers, talk to other people, but keep that dose of uncertainty, because that's what keeps you moving forward. That's what keeps you striving. Now, if I say, you feel a little apprehensive today, right? You're going to have to speak in front of 20 people or 30 people at this meeting, and you're going to have to present some ideas, and you're nervous as hell, right? That's normal. Yeah. Everybody's nervous when they have to do things like that because you're a little bit uncomfortable about being in the limelight. You're a little uncomfortable about where you are. But how do you solve that problem?
I go prepare.
Knowledge, exactly. You prepare yourself, you learn for yourself. And so I think what happens is when we tell people, oh, you have the imposter syndrome, now it sounds like something you can't get over. You can't fix that. It sounds like almost like a death sentence, right? I'm an imposter. I can't do this. Instead of saying, well, I get that you're uneasy about it, but let's talk through that. Let's work through that. And I think really when you find a good mentor in the industry, which is a great thing to do, right? Somebody, whether it's in your industry or not, somebody that you look up to that can help you through some of these feelings and things. But it happens everywhere in life. It happens on your first day of junior high school. It happens on your first day of high school, first day of college, first time doing anything. We have that same apprehension. But yet, we've decided that in industry, we have to call it an imposter syndrome, and we have to, now we're making people feel like they're in the wrong body and in the wrong job because they're not qualified. And I just feel like that's so defeatist. That's my opinion. I'm sure that, there's lots of other people that came up with that term that will disagree. But I think that healthy apprehension is important because that's really what pushes you into that growth, right? If a doctor gives me a diagnosis I don't know, I'm going to turn to Dr. Google, right? I'm going to start looking up everything I can find. If I find somebody else that has that disease or a chat group, I'm going to ask people what it's like. Now it becomes less scary because I know more about the topic. And I think that's what we have to do with anybody that's in a new position. If you are in a company and somebody is there in a new position, check in with them. People are scared to ask for help sometimes because they feel like, well, if I ask, then people are going to think I'm dumb. And we're all ignorant till we know. Everybody. I mean, nobody on this planet gets a pass for being ignorant. We're all ignorant about something until we know. And so I think if you view it that way, it becomes a healthier motivation than, oh, this is the imposter syndrome, you poor thing, right? It's part of, I think, how you approach it in your head.
Wow, it's all about the mindset. So what about a scenario where there are people who are also looking at the trend? There are massive layoffs in different big companies, even the so-called tech companies that we thought would be bulletproof from the attrition because they are the ones spearheading the revolution, the digital revolution. These big tech companies themselves are are instead spearheading the layoffs. So what do you have to say? Because I've heard a lot of people say, man, tech is overrated. I'm not going to go into tech again. And for the purpose of those who are listening to this, we are not limiting this conversation to transitioning into tech. We are generally just, inspiring people to be creative about their careers when they need to and transition to whatever works best for them. But because of the peculiarity of what we are saying, we want to use tech as an example. I just wanted to give that context before I proceed with my question. Yeah. So, like I said, people who maybe I should just stay where I am or not do something about transitioning at the moment. What do you say to that?
I would say the first thing to do is figure out why companies are laying off, right? So we know if you have a company of 100,000 employees and you lay off 3,000, that's not that big, right? That's not that huge of a part of your workforce. But if you see the headlines that say, oh, so-and-so company laid off 3,000, without knowing how many total employees they have, it sounds bad. But we know, it's just like relationships, right? You get in a relationship with a significant other, they're not all going to be hits, right? Some of them are going to be misses. And anytime that you work for a company, that's a relationship on both sides. When companies make decisions, sometimes they make stupid decisions, and it impacts everybody that works for that company. But I think that certainly when you look at layoffs in tech, it could be those situations where people just didn't fit. It could be that the company went in a new direction that turned out not to be profitable. But when you see, just because it's a technical company, there's a whole lot that goes up. Amazon's a great example, right? They have retail, they have warehousing, they have delivery, distribution, plus all of the tech stuff. And so if you hear Amazon's laying off 3,000 and you're looking at Amazon on the tech side and they say, well, 3,000 got laid off, it might not even be in the area that you have anything to do with. So first off, I would encourage you not to worry about that and look at open job positions and realize that not everybody's a fit for wherever they're going. It could be that I'm not a fit and I don't like the company and I want to leave. Or it could be the other way around. I think that sometimes people have quotas. Companies have expectations of how people are going to work or should work. Sometimes it doesn't work out. So I think that you have to kind of ignore that noise because, again, that shoves that doubt in your head. And that doubt's not good. If I join tech, man, they just had a bunch of layoffs. I'm going to get laid off. Well, if you go in there and you do your absolute best and you provide value to that company, you're not going to be one of the people that get laid off unless it's a business decision. If it's a business decision that they need to let go of higher paid people, so that they can bring in people that don't cost as much money because they have a bottom line problem. Sometimes that's the issue. But that doesn't mean that you should not consider that company. It means that you need to evaluate why those layoffs happen and figure out what your part of, what your part is going to be in that. If it's something that, that you're being hired on for a 90-day probationary period, then you need to know that in that 90 days, you better do everything you can to make sure that you still are employed at the end of that 90 days, unless you just don't like the company. So I think you have to not internalize, I guess, for lack of a better term, but you shouldn't internalize what happens to other people and expect that to be your fate. You have full control over your fate, your destiny, your life, your knowledge, and where you want to go. And even if you do go there and you work for 3 months, that's 3 months of knowledge that you have that's completely applicable to another job in whatever industry you're in, whether it's tech or some other industry, right? Apply that around. Take a nurse that goes and works for a hospital. If a hospital has a bunch of layoffs, that nurse might end up still being a nurse, but at another hospital, but not necessarily leaving her career. So I think you have to figure out kind of where your place is. And the good thing about tech, just like medical, is that it's so vast. You could work for somebody that sells the hardware. You could work for somebody that sells the earth moving equipment. You could work, it's so huge that when you see these numbers, I think sometimes you really have to put them in perspective. From 0%, one sale is 100% gain. From 1 to 100, it's not the same percentage, right? So you have to sort of figure out what those percentages are and why they happen. And I think you can look at market trends. And sometimes it's a case that maybe that thing is kind of dying. It's being replaced by something new and better. So go skill yourself in the new and better version. and then put yourself in for that, right?
Wow, thank you so much for that. Now, I want to bring you into another aspect of, digital revolution, and that pretty much like the meat of our conversation, like how to reinvent yourself, because we've just talked about, reinventing your career, jumpstarting your career, but sometimes it may just be the individual that needs the reinvention, right? Sometimes it may just be you don't even need to pivot into tech or pivot into another industry. It's just you getting familiar with what's going on and you learning how to leverage the tools, learning how to, integrate yourself into the new world that's forming. So, what are the ways and what are the tips that you can give for people out there to reinvent themselves with the changes that are fast coming and with the changes that are here already?
I would say probably one of the coolest things to do is start educating yourself in any way that you can, whether that's reading, YouTube videos, talking to people in an industry, going to local networking events. They're all over the place. There's a whole app that's meetups, that's just people that meet up in different industries. Find some folks locally so you can start getting some of that knowledge, figure out what the trends are. And I will say this, I haven't run into anybody I'm 63. I haven't run into anybody in my life, really, with the exception of somebody that was particularly busy that answered later, if I asked a question to that did not provide me an answer. I think that if you really want to grow and you really want to invest in yourself, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and you have to really put yourself forward and ask questions, because that's the only way to really grow. And I don't think that you're going to find people that are not going to answer those. And if you do, move on. Somebody else will, right? There's always that person that can answer those questions for you. But be inquisitive. Be like a child. Remember when you were 5 and everything was new, and your mom said, "Oh my God, if you ask me one more question, I'm going to pull my hair out." That, be that kid. Figure that out. Don't be afraid to ask questions. This is your life, your career, your job, how you're going to support yourself and your family. Be an active participant in there. There's a lot of people, I think, that kind of coast through. They get in a job, and then after 10 years or so, they're in the same job. Not everybody wants to grow, right? If that's you and that's what you want to do, that's fine. But I do think that the business is going to change around you. The world is going to change around you. And you just have to be a sponge and incorporate as much of that. And don't be afraid of change. That is probably the one constant in life, is change.
Wow, that's amazing. So what can you tell us about people who are trying to learn something new, but it's just not working? Like, it looks like they're not good at it. They've tried this thing, they're trying to reinvent themselves, they're trying to learn some new stuff, but it looks like they're not getting good at it. What do you have to say to people like that?
Get away from it for a minute. Seriously, if it's not sinking in, you're probably trying too hard. You're probably overthinking it. You're trying to make something more out of it or fit something else. Just walk away from it for 10 minutes. Go walk by the ocean, take a stroll in a park, go get away for a minute, clear your head, and then come back and realize, what is the barrier that's keeping this from sinking in? Is it me telling myself I can't do it? Because that's a defeatist attitude, and you'll lose 100% of the time when you do that. If it's you really putting up your own barriers, then you have to work a way around that. If it's because you don't understand what you're reading, legitimately don't understand, go ask somebody. Find another source. I taught college. And when I was teaching computer-aided engineering and computer-aided drafting, I had students in college that could not read a ruler. They were never taught that in high school. How they got out of high school not being able to read a ruler, I don't know, but it happened. And I also had students that couldn't see in 3D. So, for instance, if you look at the top and the left side of a building, you should be able to tell what the other side, third side is going to look like. Not everybody can see in 3D. It's a gift, I learned. So what I did is I put Legos and Play-Doh in my classroom. Now, the college dean really questioned that expense in my expense report. Like, why in the heck do we have Legos and Play-Dohs in college? And I said, because that's how some people need to see that third. They've got to build it. They have to be able to manipulate it and turn it. And people learn different ways. That's why some people are great in school. Some people suck at school. Some people are great at taking tests. Some people are awful. So you have to find the channel that makes it come to you. If that means reading a different book, asking somebody, doing something different, coming back to it another way. Maybe you jumped in and realized, ooh, I need a little background first. Go back to the 101 piece and then come back into it. There's lots of different avenues to learn. The trick is if you're going to learn new things, and I'm one of those people that I read all the time. I can't slow the funnel down, nor do I ever want to, right? I enjoy learning. But if you're one of those people that really hates learning, it's because you haven't figured out how you like to learn. And so the trick is going to be finding those resources. If it's podcasts, if it's, when I did my book, I did an Audible version because a lot of people said, I would read your book if I could listen to it. So I recorded the Audible and put author notes, right? Different people learn in different ways, and you have to find the style that's going to work for you. Maybe your style of learning is micro learning. There's programs out there where you can learn in 5-10 minute snippets a day. So you're assimilating knowledge without disrupting your whole life. You're assimilating knowledge in periods that you would normally be, going through time wasters and scrolling and things like that, right? Now you're replacing that with knowledge. So I think if you're not getting it, step back a minute and just come at it from a different way. Start at the back of the book and work forwards. Start with a different book. Do those different things and figure out what's going to work for you. And I would say, too, that I think our style of learning, as you're out of school, as you're out of college, how you assimilate knowledge is different as you get older, right? When you have kids running around the house and everybody's going nuts, it's a different environment than if you can sit down and have quiet time with an hour and a highlighter. So everybody learns differently at different times of their life. Give yourself some grace. Give yourself the grace to say, man, it's just, I'm not having a brain day today. I'm just, we have those days where you're just nothing, right? Sinks in. It happens. Move on. Go to the next day. Go figure out something different. And I think what you find, too, when you get away from it and you tell yourself, turn your brain off, tell your brain, not now. Your subconscious starts working things out for you. And it starts repairing that hurdle that you've put in your head. Most of the hurdles I think that we face in life are self-imposed. We think something has to be this way, or we think somebody expects us to be this way. And we put up these walls of expectation that sometimes you can't climb over unless you realize you can just walk around the stupid thing and it's good.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, let's take a step back and do like an x-ray on your journey, because just by having this conversation, I've seen how you have reinvented yourself. You've said previously that you taught college kids, you taught computer science, or you taught something tech related in college or in some school setting. You've also mentioned that you're into data centers, and then you mentioned in your profile how you founded a company that it's into IT and data centers also. I see a lot of transitioning, I see a lot of change in your journey. How did you come about data centers, as a field that you established your expertise on? And how did you reinvent yourself, from, if you can go as far as 15 years back, I'd appreciate. But just give us that movie of your life and help us glean the principles, glean the lessons, glean the moments that made it very possible for you to be where you are today.
Yeah, so for me, it was kind of easy because I grew up with the industry. The industry changed and grew as I did. So when I first started out, I was writing software. And while I was teaching college, I was teaching CAD and I was writing code for AutoCAD at the time. And so moving from that on to, then I started writing code. And then they had this project where they wanted to tie all the campuses together. And since I was not afraid of a computer, they said, hey, would you like to learn networking? So I learned networking. So mine has kind of been my reinvention has been following technology as technology has changed and grown and morphed. And then I started running data centers, and I was a consultant for a long time. So I was in a lot of opportunities for that growth and change. And I very easily could have just stopped at any point and been stuck where I am. I'm just not wired that way. I'm one of those, the boulder that goes down every hill it can find, right? So that's just kind of how I change. Has been kind of how it had to. But I will say other things too. Traveling internationally changes you. It's not just your career and what you do. I've learned a ton. I have extended family all over the planet. I've learned about different countries, different cultures, different ways they employ tech. I've learned how we're similar. I've learned how we're insanely different. And I think all of it, if you just kind of go along for the ride with a forward movement and forward motion, that leads to some of that change. And I think the other thing is just not being afraid to jump in with both feet. I've done so many things in my career that was kind of brand new that nobody did. And because it was a starting thing and you just sort of had to figure it out, half of my career has been quite literally in the fire from the frying pan. and I think that's probably the biggest change that occurred in my life, was being able to fail and not freak out. I think the culture of failure that we have really hinders a lot of growth for a lot of people. And I quite thankfully worked for a lot of folks that understood we were trying new things. Sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not going to work. But I think whatever you do, you have to give yourself that grace to fail, and you have to learn from that failure, because the people that don't have growth in their life, I think, is either because they're paralyzed by fear of failure, which is 100% a killer for sure, or they just don't have the exposure to know where to find other things. And I think that's one thing that technology and AI are really going to change for us, is that people are going to be able to do different tests and assessments and go out and ask ChatGPT, what's a day in the life like for, and then fill in a job title. And now all of a sudden we can start seeing without having to do crazy amounts of research over the same thing. But, it brings more. Now, granted, you have to check the information, like I said, but I do think it's going to bring more opportunities. And I think it's going to change the way companies hire too. I mean, take college, for instance, right? When I started this book, 31% of the adult age working population had a 4-year or better degree. 17% of those were doctors and lawyers. That means that all these companies were trying to fill all of their positions with 14% of the population that had a degree. They tried that for years. It didn't work, right? So most of the tech companies now have dropped their college degrees, their college requirements. I think we've seen a lot of this even through diversity training and what we ask for on job applications, because somebody could be a semester shy of their degree and not apply for a job if you demand one, when really they could be the most qualified candidate that you have for that job, right? The degree is not the most important bit of this piece. So I think part of that evolving is following trends, figuring out where trends are going, figuring out where whatever industry you're excited about in is going, and jump in with both feet on some of those new things, and then evolve with it and grow with it, because change is important. For me, it keeps me from being bored out of my gourd.
Wow, that's interesting. So what are the opportunities in the data center world that you have discovered that people are yet to identify, that you would like to share with us today?
I think one of the biggest things is the vast amount of trades and skilled trades we have in this industry. And those skills are directly applicable, easily applicable. So anywhere they're building data centers, which is all over the place, anything in operations in data centers takes in those trades. If you look at our veteran communities, we have tons of our military that are skilled at construction. That's what they do in the military. They can do the same thing when they get out. I think the opportunity for checks and balances, being part of the decisions around how products are made, how they work, all of that is important. Marketing, accounting. There's so many things that are related to tech that are also kind of outside of tech that are 100% importable into these industries. I think you just have to figure out kind of what you like to do. You know, do you like to work puzzles or do you not like to work puzzles? If you don't like working puzzles, don't take up coding. Right? If you like working with your hands, look at the trades, figure out what you can do within the trades, and there's jobs for you in the trades all over this industry. There are companies that are running, if you like to be outside, there's companies that are running fiber. They just had a project announced in California to install 10 million miles of fiber in the state of California. If you like being outside, that's a great job. I think a lot of it's just exposure and watching people around you when they're at work. What are they doing? When you go to lunch and you're driving in your car, what's that guy doing? Does it look like something you'd like to do? Man, he's outside all day. I would love to be outside all day. How do you get into that job? And start asking questions. And I think you'll find in every industry, people are certainly willing to help you get there. And to be fair, 85% of jobs are still filled through networking. So those are the people that are probably going to help you get into that job, not just discover what it is.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you have any final words that you'd like to leave with the audience or with the listener out there on how they can reinvent themselves, on how they can leverage digital revolution, on how they can use change and not fight change or not become victims of change in this digital world?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just to embrace it. Don't be afraid. I mean, that computer is not going to chew your arm off up to the elbow. It's just not. It's not going to reach out and poke you in the eye. It's not going to do anything that you don't tell it to do. And I think if you approach it from that perspective, or even if you're thinking about a different career, what's the worst that could happen? You fall flat on your butt, and then you pick yourself up and you try something else. Honestly, failure is not the end as long as you learn from it. Failure is an amazing thing. It's one of the best teachers we have in life. So don't be afraid to fail. Jump in with both feet. Ask a lot of questions. Reach out, and I think you'll be fine.
I'm going to drop links to your books and your products and your information on the show notes and on the description below. So if you're listening to this and you'd like to get her book titled Jumpstart Your Career in Data Centers, then just look through the show notes and you'll find a link to that book on Amazon or wherever else you can find it.